collaboration and thinking long-term about this is absolutely the right way forward.
And the North East Housing Partnership, talk me through some of the priorities.
So we came up with 4 key strategic priorities for the partnership: employability and social investment, health, care and homelessness.
Right.
Decarbonisation, probably won't surprise you to learn that that was in there. And the final one, it was in the North East. If you're talking about social housing and you're not talking to local authorities, you're missing about a third of all of the affordable homes on our patch. And that's a big gap.
What can we learn have been some of the takeaways and maybe some of the bigger challenges that you've seen from the partnership and the devolution so far?
One of the things we feel we got right was...
Paul, welcome to the podcast.
James, it's lovely to be invited. Thanks, and great to see you.
Yeah, you too. And I'm excited about this. We're talking all about the devolution deal in the North East, so I'm excited to unpack it. But just as a starting point, do you mind by giving us an introduction to yourself, Paul?
Absolutely, yeah. So my name's Paul Fiddaman. I'm the Group Chief Executive for Karbon Homes, which is a housing association with about 34,000 homes. We operate across the northeastern Yorkshire. And I have the privilege to be the first chair of the North East Housing Partnership. So well placed to give you a bit of insight into how it's come about, James.
So, I mean, let's just go back to when it was announced that there was going to be a devolution deal in the North East. Kind of, how was it received in the region? And I suppose kind of what were some of the conversations that happened subsequently?
Yeah, interesting question. I think in the wider business community, it was very broadly welcomed. I think there was a sense of, a real hunger for policy that was tailored to the specific needs of the region, and a feeling that perhaps some of the things that the previous government had been working towards weren't necessarily reflective of some of our priorities as a region. You might or might not know, James, that we've had a couple of false starts on this over the years, going back to John Prescott's days, where he held a referendum in the region about a regional assembly, which crashed and burned, was rejected royally by the good folk of the North East. And then a few years ago, the 7 Northeast local authorities were talking about a devolution deal. The 4 south of the river, for various reasons, decided it wasn't for them. So the 3 north of the river, Newcastle, North Tyneside and Northumberland, set up a North of Tyne combined authority and got cracking in that way. And it always felt like a missed opportunity to have the whole of the Northeast engaged in that discussion, and having those greater powers and flexibilities and the little bit of additional funding that comes with it. So when the deal was announced, I think it was viewed really positively. And in the housing sector, we got together and we had a chat about what we should be doing in response to that. We were obviously aware of the examples of housing partnerships existing in other geographies and other combined authority areas, and felt that it was a good opportunity, to really kind of put into practice the collaboration that we've maybe talked about in the past, but never really driven to its full potential. But also, I think this idea that we should position ourselves as the natural partners for housing delivery and associated activity for the emerging combined authority and the new mayor. So we felt that was a really good opportunity and that we should pursue it vigorously. So lots of good intention, and we set about creating our own North East Housing Partnership, James.
Nice. And the North East Housing Partnership, which has been a success, talk me through some of the priorities when you were coming together. Kind of what were the things that were discussed and what were some of the priorities that came out of those discussions, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there was a immediate recognition that we needed to do something which would be additional. So no point putting ourselves through all of that if there wasn't, a genuine belief that by working together we could deliver more than the individual organisations could deliver on their own. And At the time we were forming, of course, there wasn't an identified mayor. We were in the process of building up to an election to elect the first mayor of the North East. So we were sort of second guessing what the priorities might be. So we came up with 4 key strategic priorities for the partnership. It's a group of housing folk together, so you can probably predict the kind of things that are in there. But if I tell you that, we had a one that was around employability and social investment. That kind of made sense to us because we'd already had some success in drawing investment into the region through what we imaginatively called HENI. This is Housing Employability Network Northeast. Trips off the tongue, right? But it does what it says on the tin. It's a collection of housing providers who are, big believers in the role of housing associations and local authorities in driving that employability agenda and making sure that our customer base has access to training and employment opportunities. So we've been collaborating around that for a while, and we felt there was an opportunity to scale that and present it as a natural resource for the emerging combined authority. So the second one was around health care and homelessness.
Right.
And we felt that there's been traditional angst and challenge around working well with the health and social care sectors and this lack of joined up thinking. So we wanted to develop a way of working with each other and with health colleagues that would enable us to be part of setting the agenda on that, and just really to raise awareness of what our contribution as housing providers can be to the health agenda. And the homelessness bit of that is also very important because it's a top hurt for local authority colleagues at the moment in terms of the cost of temporary accommodation and dealing with the fallout of homelessness. So we felt we wanted to have an offer in that space as well. Decarbonisation probably won't surprise you to learn that was in there. Between the members of the North East Housing Partnership, we have something around 220,000 homes. And if you think about the cost of driving that portfolio to net zero by 2050, it is many, many billions of pounds worth of economic activity for the region. So we felt there was a real opportunity in collaborating around that as well.
Yeah.
And again, we were sort of building on some existing good practice in that space. And the final one, it won't surprise you at all to hear, James, was that we felt we should have a work stream that was focused on development and regeneration. And we felt that was probably the thing that was the biggest priority for any incoming mayor, in making sure that as we drive economic growth in the region, there's a matching housing offer that will attract people into the region and or retain the talent that we need to drive that economic growth forward. So we felt that would be an important hook for them as well.
Yeah, and let's dig into that a little bit, because this might just be from my lens, so correct me if it is, but like the Northeast really feel like they've got on with the decarbonisation agenda. All the organisations are getting ahead of target, and actually I've seen some pretty positive stuff coming out in the press around the Northeast and their decarb programme, but obviously it's one of the biggest topics in our sector. But how has the partnership helped that? What have been the symptoms of the partnership coming together to help with some of that learning? And what are some of the symptoms and the collaboration you've had across the Northeast on that?
We're building on some existing collaborative activities. So through the Northeastern Yorkshire Energy Hub, we have bid into previous rounds of what was the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. So we've done that collaboratively to get a programme of scale which was obviously attractive to DESNZ and meant we got a very healthy grant allocation to drive some of that forward. So we've had a renewed focus on that through Wave 3 and the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund. It's a partnership that extends beyond the geographical boundaries of the Northeast, but in terms of what's happening in the Northeast bit of that, I think we've got about 12,500 homes we've identified that we're bidding for funding for, and it will be something in the region of 120, 130 million pounds worth of activity. between us. So it's big stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's significant.
But there are a couple of important challenges, and this was the real driver for wanting to collaborate in this space, James. There are a relatively small number of organisations who are placed to deliver that programme of work. So we felt that if we could collaborate around the delivery of that and move on from just bidding together to actually doing it together, then we could provide some clarity and some certainty to the supply chain. And from our perspective, that could potentially drive some really important economic benefits. So if they're clear about, you know, there's a program of X million per year for the next X years, they can have the confidence to invest in innovation. And they can also, with us, engage with the further education sector and talk about training and opportunities for young people so that we know that we've got the skills coming through when we need them to deliver that program. Because at the moment, I think there's a risk of people doing that in a slightly haphazard way that isn't joined up and all scrabbling around for the same capacity in a limited supply chain and finding that, you know, there are just not enough people who are out there who can deliver a program on that scale. So we felt it was really important to start that. So we've been working together on a collaboration on delivery. We are, I mean, if you wind back a little bit, we set up a procurement consortium back in the mid-noughties to deliver the Decent Homes program.
Yeah.
So that's now known as Prosper. So it's a procurement consortium which is owned and run by the housing members, and it is primarily focused on delivering housing-related investments. So it's very much on message for us to work through that vehicle to deliver this program. So we're looking at how we can build on that kind of tangible program and go to the supply chain and say, okay, here's what we need from you. We want to try and drive some of this economic benefit that we perceive, and we want to work with you to give you certainty and help, you know, in planning and delivering that program, so that we can be as efficient as we possibly can be, because, you know, every penny counts in the current climate, doesn't it, James?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, you mentioned it, so I just wanted to pick up on it. But how important is that long-term strategy, not just for supply chain, but for housing as a general sector, to be able to put the ground roots in to make sure that we're going to be successful in the future? Because, you know, the amount of times that we're changing and chopping and changing development programs because we're not sure of funding, the amount of times they hear about decarbonisation and the lack of skills. But unless we can give 10, 15-year plans to people, we're going to struggle, aren't we, realistically, to attract people to our sector. And secondly, we're going to struggle to attract the delivery arms to be able to do this work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it probably flows through into the work that you're probably aware of, that the National Housing Federation have been pushing hard on to encourage government to get a long-term housing strategy in place. So, you know, at the budget, there was an announcement of a 5-year rent settlement. Fantastic. But that doesn't undo the damage that's been done to the sector's finances by years of intervention on rent policy, coupled with, you know, a burgeoning regulatory regime around building safety, and then compounded by inflation. And all that came after the pandemic and Brexit and all of that. So we've seen massive increase in costs. We've seen constraint on revenue. So unless we do something creative, the sector will not have the resources to deliver all of the things that it needs to deliver. So to me, it makes absolute sense that, you know, collaboration and thinking long-term about this is absolutely the right way forward.
Yeah, and I'm convinced that the reason we see so many private sector contractors fold is because we can't give this certainty of timeframes and things like that. But the more I've looked at the sector, we're the only sector I know that does 30-year business plans, like, you know. but we can't see in front of our nose in what the housing policy is going to be. So it just feels like it's not necessarily aligned half of the time.
I think the Labour team get that.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, you know, they're talking very positively about having a long-term vision for housing. Whether, given all of the economic news that we've been absorbing over the last few weeks, whether there's the financial capacity as a country to free up the resource that would be needed to back up that long-term strategy is a question that I guess we'll find out the answer to when the spending review reports back. I mean, my plea would be, if you invest in building new homes and decarbonisation, then you're driving economic activity in a really important sector of the economy. And I think it's investment in infrastructure, isn't it? It's not, as it were, a cost to the nation. It's something that has a direct payback. So if for example, you invest in higher grant rates for new build, you get a lower rent in the long term, don't you? So that saves the country money. And it feels to me like that kind of thinking is going to be really important for us. But I travel hopefully because I do believe government get that.
I agree. I do agree. And like you say, it's all coming down to what resources will be available. I also think, the last 4 or 5, if you look at the cycles, luckily I've been in the sector a long time, and if you look at cycles, we've built our way out of many recessions, right? So we all know that house building is one way that we do build ourselves back into a better economic situation. So, and talking about the new build and development and regeneration, same question really. What's coming up for you when you think of the North East Housing Partnership from a development and regeneration perspective? Because clearly that's going to be high on the agenda, right?
There's a couple of interesting dimensions to this. So over the last 5 years, the collective membership of the North East Housing Partnership have been delivering on average about 1,700 new affordable homes a year. And I think if we're going to hit the new planning guidelines around numbers of new homes, I think that probably needs to at least double. So given what we've just been talking about in terms of the financial capacity of the sector, there's a huge challenge there, and a one that I think collaboration and cooperation has an important role to play in helping us to resolve. So the work that we've been doing so far has been focused on developing a pipeline. And you'll recall we started this before there was a combined authority. So what we were trying to do was to help them pull together in relatively short order a housing strategy that included a proper acknowledgement of the amount of affordable homes that the region needs to deliver, but also to make sure that the things that were already in our pipelines had made it through to their thinking and were visible to them. And on top of that, I think we've done a bit of work around talking about some of the barriers to delivery on some of those sites. So there's a really strong understanding, we think, in the combined authority now of what the opportunities are and what things would need to be done differently if we're going to deliver against some of those. And that can vary between, speeding up planning or dealing with nutrient neutrality and all of that stuff. So there's a range of different things can slow down the development process. And, a new mayoral authority with some additional power and influence in that space could be a useful ally. So that's what we've been focused on so far. The next stage for us is we've been talking about potentially, is there an appetite in the region to collaborate a bit more around the delivery bit? So it's the same debate as the decarbonisation thing, really. Can we get to a point where we've got a programme which is clear, committed, and we can engage the supply chain in a positive way around some of that as well, and make sure that the standard and quality of what we're producing as a region is right, because it's probably uneven in the way it currently pans out. So we've been talking in the partnership meetings, about whether there's an appetite for maybe a regional strategic partnership,
right, with
the benefits of, if one scheme falls away, then another partner might have a scheme that can be parachuted in and take the place of that, so we can better guarantee the overall delivery of the programme. And that feels like a positive discussion, and it's probably one we wouldn't have been having were it not for the combined authority. but it's now starting to feel like a natural progression from the partnership discussions that we've been having so far. So, yeah, some interesting possibilities around development, James.
Yeah, and just on the development thing, are your challenges unique up in the Northeast, or do you think you're having the same challenges as everyone else? You know, when I speak to people about development, it's access to land, it's building on sites that aren't best for purpose, but trying to make it work. Like, what are some of the bigger challenges that you are facing? Is it just the same as everyone else, or is it slightly unique in the Northeast?
There are many, many similarities, of course. Mm-hmm. So all of those things, access to land that is viable for development, for affordable homes, is a challenge. You know, if I'm a landowner and I'm thinking of selling a plot of land, a land agent will come in and he'll do a valuation based on 5-bedroom executive homes, and it'll be a big number. And then we come along and we go, well, actually, we can't afford to pay that because, you know, it needs to be this because it's social housing. You know, the landowner's entitled not to want to sell under those circumstances. So you can see how that can be a challenge. I think one of the things that perhaps is a difference to some other parts of the country, you know, it's not unique, but it's certainly different, is the economics of regeneration. So we, you know, if you hark back to the conversation about decarbonisation, you've got lots of properties where the cost of bringing them up to an acceptable modern energy performance level is prohibitive, and it's more than the properties are worth in the first place. So the economics of that are kind of suicidal, really, if you think about it. But there's a real challenge in persuading, particularly Treasury, I think, that replacing that moribund housing with something new and modern is a good use of public funds. And that you get stuck on this debate about net additionality. So if I've got a block of flats with 50 apartments in them, and I want to knock them down and build a load of bungalows because that's what that community needs, you're going to end up with fewer homes and a lower density. And you know, it is very, very obviously the right thing for that particular community, but you wouldn't get funding for that as things currently stand, because that idea of reducing density is problematic. And this, I think, is one of the interesting challenges of having policymakers who are exposed to the challenges of the London housing market more than any other. And this, I think, is one of the interesting things when we talk about the direction of travel for devolution. Greater control and greater flexibility over how money is spent against local priorities would be really useful, because obviously the combined authority will understand some of those local challenges and will perhaps have a greater degree of flexibility over how some of that funding is deployed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, we talked about the partnership. It's relatively new in real terms, but I think it started a bit of a movement. I'm hearing other regions are going to go down the devolution route. What can we learn have been some of the takeaways and maybe some of the bigger challenges that you've seen from the partnership and the devolution so far?
One of the things we feel we got right was to involve our local authority colleagues from the get-go. In the Northeast, if you're talking about social housing and you're not talking to local authorities, you're missing about a third of all of the affordable homes on our patch. And that's a big gap, you know. So I think it was really important that we had local authorities around the table from day one. That's massively helpful to housing associations to understand the priorities of your local authority colleagues who are, you know, they're obviously the key facilitators of what goes on in their patch. And if they're on side and they know where we're coming from and we know where they're coming from,
yeah, of course,
you've got a chance, haven't you? You can do something collectively that meets their strategic priorities. I think housing associations can be a little bit responsive, a little bit reactive in the way they do development. So you're picking up opportunities and pursuing those opportunities rather than approaching it strategically and saying what does my local authority partner actually want from us in this geography and approaching it like that. So that's probably the biggest single thing. We've been using this isn't intended as a shameless plug, but it is one anyway. We've been using the Northern Housing Consortium as our secretariat, and that's been really helpful because they not only do they have a sort of professional resource, but they've got a really strong convening capability. So when you need those local authority people to engage, you're getting the right people, and you're getting a positive response to an approach. So that's worked really well for us. And I think a bit nebulous, I guess, but having a genuine spirit of trust and a desire to work collaboratively, I think is something I would say was there from the start. When the very first meeting where we said, should we explore this, there was pretty much universal acknowledgement that this was something important that we should commit to as a region. So I think that that's worked well for us as well. In terms of challenges, I mean, many and varied. Sometimes a bit like herding cats, but underpinned by this spirit of collaboration. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because you get a bunch of chief execs in the room and go, shall we collaborate? And we go, yeah, great, absolutely. Why wouldn't you? You then send your asset managers into a room on their own and they go, what the chuff's this about, So I just think there's something about, not only collaborating between organisations, but making sure that messaging is right in our own organisations.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Making sure that people across the board are bought into this. And I've just come out of a meeting in Karbon this morning, and they were giving me some great examples of collaboration around development. So it sounds like there's a bit of momentum behind that now, James. And the other thing I would say is don't underestimate the challenge of getting around the table with colleagues from the health and social care sectors and getting the right people to have the right level of conversation. So we've got a really good connection now with the Integrated Care Board. Their geography is different to ours, so their issues are overlapping but not exactly aligned. So just getting the right people around the table and having the right conversations is quite an art, it seems to be.
Yeah, and look, the one thing I've always thought of in the Northeast is you are great at collaborating. Like, I think that there is a synergy across the organisations in the Northeast and a will to want to collaborate. And I think, I don't know if you were the starting point for that, probably, maybe not, but I think the sector is starting to realise collaboration is going to be the way we fix some of these problems. And I hope that continues, because I'm certainly seeing from repairs service, we had Paul Walker on the podcast and he was talking about like starting to get some repairs done in certain regions that they can cover and others can't. And you can see over time we could solve this problem, decarbonisation, development, and certainly repairs and maintenance, through collaboration and starting to help each other out with certain problems and issues. And I hope that does continue, but the Northeast feels, from an outsider looking in, that happens quite regularly.
Yeah, and we have got some great examples of collaboration that existed, before the housing partnership was created and continue to exist. So we've got a group of colleagues who've been meeting under the glorious banner of SHINE. So social housing innovation.
You've got some names and stuff, haven't you?
Haven't we? Yeah, absolutely. They're great because they are people from all sorts of different teams across members, and they get together and, they sort of identify a particular problem that they want to think about. So the thing that they've been working on most recently is a GIS mapping of everybody's portfolios. So we can see, for example, if we've got a bunch of properties in a town and so have 2 or 3 other partners, things like community investment, you can start to join those things up when you start to join the dots like that. And there's it's obvious really when you think about it, but it's not obvious till you do it.
No.
That ought to enable us to be a bit more joined up in the way we do some of that. And not every organisation needs to reinvent wheels on every bit of its geography. If there's somebody better placed to lead than us, we should know who they are, we should know what they're doing, and we should be asking them to help us do it for our customers as well. So lots of interesting things going on there, James.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it is really good to see, and I hope it continues for the sector. I suppose just going back quickly, and the final thing for me as we run out of time a little bit is for the North East Housing Partnership. What's next? Like, what are you excited about? What's some of the stuff that's coming up that you're actually really looking forward to?
We've done a lot of really good and positive conversation, James. I'd like to see us be able to demonstrate a track record of delivery now.
Right.
I'm always more comfortable talking about stuff that we've done than stuff that we're going to do.
Yeah.
So I'd love to be sat here in 12 months' time saying that collaboration around decarbonisation has worked really well. And, we've got a new training programme with an alliance of Northeast colleges, and we know that we're going to have the people we need on stream when we need, and all of that. And, maybe we've got a new strategic partnership, which is a collaboration across the region. Let's turn it into action, and let's make sure that we've got something we're going to point to, which is tangible, which has moved the combined authorities agenda forward and helped us all as individual members to deliver what we need to deliver as well.
Amazing. A really nice way to finish. I mean, firstly, thank you for giving your insights. It sounds like a really exciting time, not just for Karbon, but for the Northeast as a general housing community. But yeah, I really appreciate it. And it's been really useful to understand what the Northeast Housing Partnership is going to be doing. And hopefully we can get you back on when there's some action, as you say, and some things we can talk about around some of the deliverables and the lessons learned.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, James.
Cheers,
really
Paul.
enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.